this clip, it was on Twitter Spaces that he did this interview with this BBC journalist called James Clayton. Now, James Clayton, Jess, is BBC North America, the tech reporter. I mean, quite why the BBC pays for a North American tech reporter, I don't actually know. It's the British Broadcasting Corporation, not, the American Silicon Valley tech checkers. But it was quite clear to me that he turned up with absolutely no preparation for this interview with Elon, and Elon, frankly, handed him his arse.
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I
you
don't.
Can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that for you feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you
and
said
actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second.
my
You said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
then how did you see that hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying...
Then I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet.
It was absurd. I mean, it was BBC fake news at its most potent. This hate speech that is apparently awash on Twitter, yet he couldn't cite one single sodden example. And I guess the meat of this issue, Jess, the reason why the BBC wanted this interview with Musk, and Musk said, come on in. He is a champion of free speech, and I have the utmost respect for Musk for it. And it just shows that sunlight is the best disinfectant, because when these people are actually challenged on these notions, on these charges that they put to Musk and others, they can't actually back them up with any real-world evidence. But the problem with the BBC is that they've actually been using, over recent days, their chokehold over their monopoly over the British broadcasting market to wax lyrical about how it's disgusting that Twitter have said that they're government funded. It actually demanded that Twitter remove the tag as soon as possible. Now, I think Elon Musk, especially after this interview, should stand his ground and say, I absolutely won't do that. I mean, the BBC, Jess, gets 3/4 of its funding from the licence fee payers. That's billions of quid from us if we want to watch live telly. Might not be the BBC, but we've still got to pay it. I actually saw a thread from an American that had just discovered that this is how we actually fund the BBC, by threat of prison. And they were like, this is obscene. Like, this is absurd. And I thought, yeah, it is actually, isn't it? Like, I wish more people would wake up to that fact, that it is obscene that a single mother who might not be watching the BBC because they might not agree with its content, but if they want to watch GB News live, well, they've got to pay the BBC license fee. It's the kind of thing that you would see in some kind of banana republic to fund some, government-backed broadcaster. And it's just like any other government-mandated tax. If you don't pay it, you end up in the slammer. How is that not government-funded, right? How is that not related to the government? The government is the one that sets the license fee as well. The government gets to tell the BBC, yeah, you can increase with inflation. No, you can't increase with inflation. All the rest of it. The BBC could be told tomorrow that its funding model has to be changed. And every week, 1,000 Britons, Jess, are prosecuted for not paying the teletax. And in 2018, more people, it was one of the biggest rates of prosecution in Britain. It was 128,000 people. 128,000 people. That is, to me, a completely unjustifiable number of people being dragged through the courts for not wanting to pay Gary Lineker, the crisp salesman's salary, so he can wax lyrical on Twitter about how we all use the rhetoric of Nazis in saying that we don't want illegal migrants coming to this country. Elon Musk, in my view, he ought to stand his ground and recognise that were he living in Britain as a billionaire, it would be absurd for him to be paying 150 odd quid to the BBC and a single mother in, Dagenham paying 150 odd quid, the exact same fee, flat rate tax, to fund this antiquated and out of touch broadcaster. I think they've shown themselves up here, Jess. Long may it continue.
I also think it shows the difference between the old establishment media like the BBC, which is increasingly woke, increasingly don't have a clue what they're on about, as shown by the Twitter space, and this new media of Twitter, where individuals like you, like many political commentators, can share stories that actually matters to the average person, instead of claiming, instead of running a story that the British countryside is too white as the BBC's done. Now we can share stories that actually matter. I doubt the Posey Parker story would have got so much attention if it wasn't for Twitter. I think that's the power of it. It truly is the marketplace of ideas now.
Yeah, it is. It's very much the public square, the de facto public square. That's why Elon's takeover was so important, to actually ensure that free speech would be protected on the platform. And I think, for the most part, I'm quite positive about Elon's handling of Twitter and what he's done with it. I mean, ultimately, Jess, if the BBC wants to be independent and get rid of its government-funded tax, maybe it should join me, right, in being the loudest advocate for the BBC adopting another funding model, more along the lines of Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. And don't get us wrong, Jess, whilst I'm very critical of the BBC has a vast archive. It goes back 100 years. There will be many people throughout the world who would be willing to subscribe to the BBC for its content. What has it got to fear? And ultimately, this is a bit like every other sort of communist regime throughout the world, where it can't rely, or it fears to such a large extent the public being allowed to choose, that instead it has to rely on coercive controls and coercive taxes set by government to actually maintain its power. What is the BBC so scared of? It's almost like they recognise that there would be a flood away from it, were it to actually lose the right to coercion like this. Speaks volumes, if you ask me. Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk, and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.